So I think this is our fourth podcast together.
Yeah.
And it's been really, really cool to not only do them with you, Zara, but also so many other interesting people here in Dubai and across the world.
So much fun.
It's pretty challenging, right?
It's funny because we talk about so many things naturally every day, right? We sit and walk and talk. Then we have tea after lunch and talk. And then when we have to talk in front of the camera, it's like, we should just record our talks.
We should just record. We should just record what we talk about on the couch, because I tell you what, it's a heck of a lot easier than setting up all of this technology every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the premise of this talk/chat is, I guess it revolves around the fact that, look, you did a degree in psychology, right? You have a master's in HR. And I often joke, and I think I've talked about this in other podcasts, that I am your main patient when it comes to psychology, but also for relationship therapy as well.
Nutrition, everything.
Exactly.
So, guinea pig.
Yeah, so I'm a guinea pig, but also maybe, hopefully I'm becoming my best self.
You are. We are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. It's really, really cool. So on the premise of relationships and the psychology of relationships, I do get free treatment.
Jokes aside, but I think it's there's two things, right? There's three things when you are in your 40s and when you've been through a few relationships, in my case, and long ones in your case. It's kind of, we understand things a lot better and it becomes a lot easier. So we always say that, right? If you knew what you know nowadays in your 20s, life would be just much easier. Maybe not as much fun or exciting, but it will be easier for sure.
Yeah. And, the whole thing around communication. I mean, look, you're a trained psychologist. You've got a master's in HR, and everything's about communication and understanding in those areas. And also you've done couples therapy, you've done children's therapy. I think that for me, it's fascinating to see that organically communication is really important, but also there's some structure that you need to put around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we tend to think that's something that just should be natural, but it's not. I believe in learning about how to communicate, because what happens is you communicate the way you learned to your family and friends, and most of the time it's not the right way, right? And we a lot of times don't communicate well, and we create conflict. So we just a lot of times we imitate, or we just do it again what we've seen in our family
and previous relationships as well.
Relationships, and then it's a lot of times it's not the best or healthiest way.
One of the things, and I was talking to my friends about this the other day, around familiarity in a relationship, right? And it feels like, I know in the West there is a big, you're Brazilian, I'm, born in the UK, brought up in New Zealand. So I talk about kind of my experience. There is this drive and belief that couples should be friends or best friends. And there's no doubt that being best friends is a critical piece. But that friendship piece and familiarity piece, I forgot who the author is. She's a French.
Esther Perel.
That's the one, Esther Perel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I really like her model around, you need to have some form of buffer between you and your emotional partner, your physical partner, your spiritual partner.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be some form of lack of familiarity with your partner to be able to really truly reach the pinnacle of great communication, great partnership. I mean, what are your views on that?
I believe the book is called Mating in Captivity.
Mating in Captivity.
Yeah,
okay.
That we both read. It's funny enough, I've never thought about that, right? And I studied psychology, and I read books and books about relationships for myself to get it right. And what she says is really interesting. It's about understanding that separation of, your husband or your boyfriend or your partner is your best friend, but then you have the other part, right? He's your lover, or he might be the father of your children. And when you focus on one thing, a lot of women, when they become mothers, for example, they become mothers, right? And they forget that they are women, they are lovers. So I think it's understanding those roles in the relationship and how to balance them. So if you're friends and it's only friendship, you kind of leave aside the sensuality, the sexual part, the intimacy. If it's just passion and love, it's, so it's about balancing those aspects and understanding and putting some work into that, because a lot of things that people think comes naturally, especially when we're young, we think, oh, you only need love. I wish, right? It's not only about love. You need so many, you need a lot of understanding. We're from different cultures, right? That if you think about a couple from the same culture, it's hard enough, but putting two people from different cultures, from different upbringings, it's you have to do some work on that.
How would you describe the cultural difference? So you're Brazilian, right? So what's your lens? And I know you always say you're not a typical Brazilian. I don't know, because I've only have a group of one that I've ever met. I'm not allowed to talk to other Brazilian women. So
I'm told I'm not typical. I think the way I think is not very typical Brazilian. And the reason why I always avoided having relationships with Brazilian men is, I don't want to generalize, but it's, like I said, it's a cultural thing. It's, I don't really, it's not how I see things and the relationships.
But how do you define Brazilian woman? I know it's a stereotype, right? And no one's going to judge you on this, but how would you define, say, Brazilian woman, Brazilian men versus your perception of, say, let's use New Zealand as an example, right? New Zealand woman, New Zealand men. Like, how would you, because you lived in New Zealand for a while, your son was born in New Zealand.
Yeah.
What's your kind of view of those two kind of parallels?
I mean, I've lived in America, in New Zealand. I've lived enough in Italy to understand, how
Italian men.
Yeah.
And you've also traveled 90 countries as well.
Yeah, so I pay a lot of attention, having studied psychology, I pay a lot of attention to people and cultural differences. I think that what I've learned with you, being British, like you grew up in New Zealand, but you have a lot of British in you.
British.
I would say it's a lot more, again, you're the only British guy I know, but from what I see, it's a lot more formal.
I'm very formal.
It's not, there's not so much passion and screaming. And in Brazil, we're very passionate and we're very fiery. And it's, we talk and we scream, and it's like similar to Italians, right? There's a lot more passion. It's not always good when you have a heated discussion. So I think when you talk about discussions or conversations, it's more controlled, balanced. Yeah. I think that's a positive thing, to have that balance. I've learned a lot in that sense. And I think, again, age helps when you're more mature and understand that the importance of good communication, the importance of stopping and having taking a breath, walking away a little bit and coming back. It's all things that are learned. They don't come naturally in most cases. I mean, some people are lucky, right? And they have their first boyfriend, sweetheart from high school, and that's it for them.
We have some friends in Italy, right? And they're from the States, and they've been together for 50 years, right? And they're an amazing couple.
Yeah, and that's beautiful to see, but it's quite rare to see that beautiful. They have everything, right? Everything. Of course, I'm sure they have been through a lot, but they have harmony, they have love, they have complicity, they know how to communicate, they have intimacy. So all those aspects that, if you look into each one of them, they're so important, right? Good communication, intimacy, shared goals, knowing how to deal with conflicts. Understanding the other person's culture and cultural differences.
From your perspective, with doing, you do couples therapy, right? So you sit down with couples, you sit down with individuals who are going through challenges. What would you say are some of the common issues that you see in couples, And what would you say from a personal perspective, as you've kind of evolved as a woman, what are the things that are most important for you to have right in a relationship? So firstly, what are the common issues? And secondly, what do you think are the most important things to have right in your relationship?
Well, funny enough, dealing with, being in Dubai and knowing so many people from different cultures, and we are different, but, when it comes to relationship and those complaints from men and women, it's very similar. If you're talking to couples in Brazil or from England, in Dubai, it will be, I think, communication is a big one. Misunderstandings. Women want to be understood. Men want to be left alone. So I think if it's something that I hear all the time, and that's simple as that, is like women want to be understood and listened to. Men a lot of times want to find the solution, and a lot of times they don't have the solution. And men want to be left alone. They need the time and space.
That's something that I ask for a lot, right? Which is time and space.
Mm-hmm.
How does a woman, how does a wife, a partner provide time and space to their husband? Mm-hmm. And conversely, how does a man listen to understand, listen to understand rather than just listening?
The time and space, a lot of times I used to think as well, it's to walk away and you need to go away for the weekend. It doesn't need to be that. Sometimes it's just being aware that the other person needs to be quiet, needs to be left alone, right? So if you're reading or working or doing something, and men are very focused on what, and I have a son, so I've learned that with my son as well. Just let them do this thing, and women, we multitask. So our mind is like dealing with thousands of things at the same time, and we can manage that. But, and men can't. So if he's stressed, or he needs his time, or he's tired, or he's just focused on something, just let him be and leave him alone for, sometimes it's only 10 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. Just exactly. If you have to talk about something, just leave it for later. Right? If it's not something urgent, and it's something that I've learned, and I think it's extremely important, because we don't have the same timings or the same way to deal with conflict or to communicate. And I think part of a good relationship is to understand not what's to be a man and a woman, but how to communicate, especially at times of stress, because it's easy to communicate when everything is going well. But when you are like traveling, and especially with
trying to do a podcast,
podcasts and traveling, like I think all the discussions or disagreements we had was in airports, because there is stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And we deal with stress in different ways. I want to get things done my way. You want to get things done your way. And then it becomes a lot more difficult. But when you sit down at a different time and talk about those situations when it's not happening, leave it and then talk another time, then it has better chances to succeed.
That's interesting, because I'm pretty sure we've solved our airport issue. I mean, a great example would be if there's a problem, you want to solve it, and you want to, I'm not going to say complain, but you want to be able to bring it up with the staff and talk about it and kind of push it through. Whereas if there's a problem, I just want to stand back. I just trust that the system, that it will solve itself. And it wasn't really until we recognized that, because we travel a lot, right? And it took a couple of years for us to realize, hang on a second, there's some form of disconnect here. And it was that communication piece outside of the stressful event that helped us understand that. And you drove that, of course. I mean, you know how to do counseling, you know how to do therapy, but it comes back to that second point around, it still needed me to listen to understand, right? I needed to actually accept that you wanted to talk about it, that there was a problem, and I had to take the time out to be able to understand. And to be fair, that's sometimes pretty hard for me. I mean, look, I'm a CEO of businesses, right? I spend most of the time consuming information. When I am with you or when I come home, I just want to either switch off or relax.
Everything to be perfect.
You want everything to be perfect. I know that's a terrible thing, and that's a bad trait that I have, but that listening piece was really important. And I actually think that...
And listen to understand.
Exactly, listening to understand. And I think the key is being open, but also, to the point you said, is doing it outside of the event and recognizing that if the two people can come together and talk about it and communicate properly outside of the event, you can probably internalize it, rationalize it, and then be a better person for the next time you have that challenge.
Yeah. And I think as well, a lot of times in relationships, people think, what am I doing wrong? What's the other person doing wrong? Am I right? You're right. I think it's about what is the common goal is to have a harmonious, happy relationship. So when you change the focus from, am I right? He should listen, he should do, and to, okay, what's the disconnect here and how can we make this relationship better and focus on the relationship and not on one person or another who is wrong and who is right. Then if you have that goal in mind, both of you, then you have better chances of working it out because it's like, okay, what can we do for the relationship?
One of the jokes, I love a good joke and I love a good joke about relationships, but one thing that's always irked me is that saying, and it's not because I'm a man, that saying of, oh, the woman is always right. And women will joke about it, that they're right in a relationship, and men will joke about that the woman is always right. And that really grates me because I'm not saying I'm the perfect partner. I have a lot of faults. But one thing I can always managed to do is to recognize, it's not about empathy, but recognize that I'm not always necessarily right. There are certain times where I see you smiling. There are certain times where I am right, which is most of the time. But genuinely recognizing that I'm not always right, and that's not your default position. And so when you can have that approach, you can enter a discussion, you can enter some form of conflict with a view that if you're not always right, then the other person is not always right. So it's, again, coming back to that point where you need to have some form of base and communication about. It's actually the problem that you need to talk about.
Yeah. And like I said before, we think it comes natural. It doesn't. And, there are ways to deal with conflict resolution, right? And attachment styles, like how, and if you think about languages of love, right? There's a great book that most people know about, the 5 languages of love, and how I show love is not necessarily how you do. How you want to feel loved is different from how I see it. So if you understand the attachment styles and how people feel loved and show loved in different ways, if you have that understanding and that maturity, then it's a lot simpler because most of the times we're not doing things wrong because we don't love the other person. Sometimes we just don't know what's the best way to show them love or to show. Yeah.
And a really good example of that in practical terms is your language of love may be receiving gifts, right? Therefore, you buy gifts for someone, but their language of love might be attention. They might be physical attention, or it might be just time spent. And so giving, like me, I don't care about gifts, right? In fact, I am uncomfortable receiving gifts. So if you give me a gift, I remember that time you bought me the DJ set for Christmas, and you bought me like a really fancy DJ set, and I got really angry, and I was like, why did you do that? And it seems counterintuitive. It seems churlish. It seems childish. It seems ridiculous that I would complain about this fantastic DJ set. But the fact is that I felt uncomfortable receiving a gift, whereas I'm more of a time, attention, praise, right? If I get praise and attention, I'm good. Yeah. And so I think that piece, that's a perfect example of those sort of 5 languages of love. So people can spend their whole life giving the wrong language, right? Yeah. And you think the other person is being ungrateful.
Yeah. And the other thing that I talk to friends about, or sometimes clients, because like I said before, a client might come to me because they want to lose weight, but then when you realize the problem is that they're going through a divorce or they're really unhappy in a relationship, relationships are extremely important, right? It changes everything in our lives. I mean, relationships at work or with your partner. So, and influences how you feel, how you decide to live your life, how you eat, how you sleep. It has a big impact. So a lot of times relationship is the thing to look at, the focus. And women, like I said, most of my clients are women, they come and complain 90%, 95% about the same things. It's the same thing. And it's about my husband or my partner doesn't listen, doesn't care. I'm like, I feel overwhelmed and I do so much and and a lot of times they don't choose the right way. Of course, there's no right or wrong, right? The right way to talk about it. And I think that women in most cultures, we tend to take the responsibility on us. We learn that we need to carry the relationship or we need to do everything. And a lot of times it's not even worth it, right? So there are times when it's a great relationship and there's room to fix it or to manage it. And sometimes there isn't, right? And
so would you ever tell, I mean, you don't tell clients to leave the person that they were, but
I've told friends.
You've told friends. So do you believe that there are just relationships that are just not worth pursuing?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what would be one common, we're in Dubai, there's so many different cultures, right? So let's kind of keep it global here. What would be one common relationship type that you see that is dysfunctional?
I would say any type of toxic relationship is not worth it, right? I am someone who is the typical woman. I have been very persistent. I used to think that it's on me. I have to change. I have to do it. I have to be better. I have to work on it. And a lot of women think that way. It's a good thing, but it gets to a point where how much is too much, right? And how much is the other person doing? Of course, not all relationships are perfect, but there's a point that you need to have that checklist. What are the things that are really important for you and that you really value? Is the other person giving you that or not, right? And be a bit more, what's that word? Rational about it. And really putting into perspective, okay, am I getting the very important things that I need? Of course, you need to pick your fights. There are things that are not that important, right? If the guy leaves the
dishes out, the toothpaste out, his shoes out, his socks out, didn't make the bed this morning.
I can live with that. Right?
Yeah.
So that's not major, but there are things that are major. And you need to, of course, I don't tell my clients or friends to, okay, that's not working. They will find out themselves. But what is really important and what you feel like it's not going to change. And then go from there.
Tell me I guess as we wrap up, because this is just a short session, looking at childhood, let's not use trauma, but let's look at our parents, right? How much do you think our parents impact our approach to being a partner, good or bad?
Oh my gosh, so much. So much. A lot of times, like I said, when we are older and we have had so much therapy like I have in my life, and you do things wrong and you go from one marriage to divorce and you kind of learn at some point, but you just tend to go into relationships and just do similar things that your parents have done, right? Just copy and most of the time, it's not a great thing because you're just repeating what you've seen and what you've learned, and it's something that you just don't think about. So a lot of times, that's the biggest problem, the biggest issue. And when you do some therapy, or you are old enough to really have time to understand your relationships and the toxic ones and what is wrong and what you want to do better and improve yourself as well, and have your boundaries. Like when you know yourself better, forget about the other person. You know yourself better and you have your boundaries and you understand, okay, who I am, what do I need in my life, what type of person, what are the characteristics, what I'm not going to accept. Then it makes it a lot easier to, from the beginning, see the red flags, or if you don't see it from the beginning, later on, okay, well, that's not working, and what can we do, and assess it in a more pragmatic way.
Is it, and you're the psychologist, right? So you're going to have to help me here, but is it a Freudian thing around sons wanting a wife like their mother, or daughters wanting a husband like their father? Is that true or false? I mean, or is that even correct? Is that Freud? I don't know.
It is, yeah, but it's how can I put it? It's not right or wrong. I mean, if as a boy, the first woman that you know and that you look up to is your mother, right? That's the first female in your life that you may find pretty, or what she does is nice, or she smells nice, or she does this that way. So that's your first understanding of what a female should be like.
Okay.
So unconsciously, you might look for women that match a little bit your mother, or maybe how she looks or how she did things, or because it's a comfort zone. It makes you feel comfortable.
So it's about comfort.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about knowing. It's about the being, how can I put this? Being
is it like muscle memory, that something you've had, you're familiar with?
Familiarity.
It comes back to that book, right?
Yeah. So that happens, and we don't think about it, but it's, and when women, a lot of times I'm talking about women because I have more experience with talking to women, but being in a toxic relationship a lot of times just replace what they go through in childhood. Why do we choose to be in a relationship that makes you suffer? No one chooses that rationally, right? But it's something that it's what you know. So what if you come from a household and a childhood of drama and trauma and pain, then you're going to navigate towards that. You're going to, because that's what you know, that's your comfort zone. And then it takes some time in relationships and understanding and therapy to kind of get it to a point where you dissociate yourself from your story and from what you know to what you choose.
Okay. So as we wrap up, as always, what I try to see is, I guess, some sort of key outtakes. What would be the 3 things that you would say each of us can do now or in the future to be a better partner when we go home after work or when we go home to see our husband or wife?
Know yourself.
Okay.
Well, understand yourself, who you are and what your needs are, because that's the most important thing before you have a relationship and to make a relationship work. So, because if you don't know yourself and who you are, what you want, how do you know what you want from a relationship, right? Know your boundaries, to avoid pain and problems and toxicity, and good communication, open communication. If I have to do it.
Beautiful. Okay. So know yourself, know your boundaries, and be able to communicate. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to finish up and think about who I am, write down my boundaries, and work on my communication.
I'm sure you do. Thank you.
Thank you.